I'm going to begin writing the complete 12,000-word story based on your outline and requirements. I'll write it as a YouTube voiceover script with proper formatting and will include all the specified elements. I'm Claire, 68 years old, and once a struggling single mother who worked as a nurse. For years, my son Jeffrey laughed at me for renting a small apartment. Now I own a beautiful villa on the California coast that I purchased with my own hard-earned money. I never expected Jeffrey would show up after all this time with an entitled demand that shocked me to my core. His new wife, he said, would love living here. If you're watching this video, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you in your own home? I'd love to know your story as I share mine. After my husband Thomas died, suddenly from a heart attack when Jeffrey was just 10 years old, our lives changed forever. I found myself alone raising our son and struggling to make ends meet on my nurse's salary at Memorial Hospital. The loss of Thomas meant not only emotional devastation, but also financial hardship as we went from 2 incomes to 1. We had to move from our modest family home to a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't the safest. The walls were thin, the plumbing unreliable, and the neighbors sometimes loud, but it was what I could afford while still ensuring Jeffrey could continue his education at the private school Thomas and I had enrolled him in before the tragedy. Every month was a financial juggling act. I worked long shifts at the hospital, often picking up overtime and night differentials to earn extra money. My schedule became a complex puzzle of work commitments and Jeffrey's school activities. I missed school plays and sports games more often than I wanted to admit, but I was doing everything possible to provide stability for my son. Despite our limited income, I was determined that Jeffrey would have opportunities. I scraped together money for his soccer team fees, summer camps, and the latest sneakers that he insisted he needed to fit in with his wealthier classmates. This meant I went without new clothes, haircuts, or any personal indulgences for years. My old Honda Civic became a family joke among Jeffrey's friends as it made concerning sounds and had rust spots that grew larger each year. But I couldn't justify buying a new car when that money could go toward Jeffrey's college fund instead. The car got us where we needed to go, and that was what mattered to me. As the years passed and Jeffrey entered his teenage years, I noticed a shift in his attitude toward our living situation. What had once been acceptance gradually transformed into resentment. He began comparing our apartment to his friends' spacious homes, asking why we couldn't live in a normal house like everyone else. "Mom Tyler's house has a pool and a game room," he'd say after spending the weekend at a friend's place. "His mom doesn't even work and they have 2 new cars." I tried to explain our circumstances, but how do you help a teenager understand sacrifice and financial limitations when all they see is what they don't have? Despite the hardship, I held on to a dream. Every night after finishing my shift and coming home to our small apartment, I would allow myself a few minutes of fantasy. I'd open real estate listings on my ancient laptop and scroll through homes I couldn't afford. Beautiful houses with gardens, large kitchens, and windows that let in natural light. Homes with views and character and space to breathe. Someday, I would whisper to myself, someday I'll have a real home again. I started my Someday Home Fund when Jeffrey was 13. It wasn't much at first, just $20 from each paycheck tucked away in a separate savings account. Some weeks I couldn't contribute anything at all when unexpected expenses arose, like the time Jeffrey needed emergency dental work or when our refrigerator died suddenly. But I remained disciplined about saving whatever I could. During my lunch breaks at the hospital, I'd visit real estate websites on the ancient computer at the nurses' station. My colleagues would often find me scrolling through listings, studying floor plans, and calculating impossible mortgage payments. "What are you saving for, Claire?" my friend and fellow nurse Diane once asked me. "A home," I answered simply. "My own home someday." She had smiled sympathetically, both of us knowing how unlikely it seemed on our salaries. But the dream gave me something to hold on to during the hardest days. As I was setting aside money for a down payment that seemed impossibly far away, I was also contributing to Jeffrey's college fund. His education came first always. I wanted to give him the foundation for a better life than the one I could provide at the time. If that meant delaying my own dreams, so be it. That's what being a parent meant to me, sacrificing for your child's future. I remember how proud I felt the day I reached my first savings milestone, $5,000 in my home fund. Wasn't much compared to real estate prices, but it represented countless extra shifts, brown bag lunches, and years without a vacation. I celebrated alone with a single glass of cheap wine and allowed myself to believe, just for that evening, that my dream wasn't completely impossible. Jeffrey knew nothing about my someday home fund. I kept it private, partly because I didn't want him to feel responsible for my sacrifices, and partly because I was afraid to voice the dream out loud. What if I failed? What if I never saved enough? The dream was fragile, and I protected it like a flickering flame that could be extinguished by the slightest doubt. During those years, I watched other nurses at the hospital buy homes with their husbands or partners. I attended housewarming parties and brought modest gifts, genuinely happy for my friends while fighting back the question that haunted me. Would it ever be my turn? But I kept going, working extra shifts when they were available, living frugally and saving systematically. My colleagues often invited me to dinners out or weekend trips that I declined, knowing each dollar saved brought me incrementally closer to my goal. Some thought I was merely antisocial, not understanding that every choice I made was in service to a future I could barely allow myself to imagine. Through it all, I focused on Jeffrey, trying to give him stability and opportunities despite our limitations. I hoped that someday he would understand the sacrifices I had made and appreciate the values of hard work and persistence I was trying to instill in him. Little did I know then how differently our paths would diverge as he grew older and formed his own values and priorities. As Jeffrey entered his senior year of high school, college applications became our primary focus. His grades were good enough to earn him acceptance letters from several universities, including a prestigious business school that had been his first choice. I was bursting with pride the day that thick acceptance package arrived in the mail. "You did it." I hugged him tightly, tears in my eyes. "I always knew you could." The celebration was short-lived, however, as reality set in. The scholarship offered covered only a portion of the tuition, and even with my college fund savings, we were facing a significant financial gap. I took on additional weekend shifts and secured a loan to make up the difference, determined that my son would have this opportunity. "Don't worry about the money," I told Jeffrey. "This is your future. We'll make it work." Jeffrey left for college with new clothes, a laptop, and everything else he needed for his fresh start. I drove him to campus in my aging Honda, now making even more concerning noises than before. As we unloaded his belongings, I couldn't help but notice how he quickened his pace when a group of students walked by, as though embarrassed by the car or perhaps by me in my simple, worn clothes. During his freshman year, Jeffrey called home less and less frequently. When he did, our conversations were brief and centered around whether I had transferred money to his account for books or spending money. I told myself this was normal for college students becoming independent, but I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. It was during his sophomore year that Jeffrey met Melissa. She came from a family with considerable wealth. Her father owned a successful real estate development company. When Jeffrey mentioned her during our infrequent calls, his voice changed, becoming animated in a way I rarely heard anymore. "Her family has a house in Aspen," he told me during one conversation. "They've invited me for spring break." The trips with Melissa's family continued ski vacations, summers at their beach house, and holidays at their primary residence, a mansion in an exclusive neighborhood. Jeffrey's social media, which he rarely accepted my friend requests on, filled with images of these luxurious locations, his arm around Melissa, both of them looking polished and at ease among opulence. With each passing semester, I noticed a transformation in my son. His speech patterns changed, adopting the cadence and vocabulary of his wealthy peers. He developed expensive tastes in clothing and food. The values I had tried to instill, frugality, appreciation for simplicity, finding joy in non-material things, seemed forgotten, replaced by an admiration for wealth and status. The summer before his junior year, Jeffrey announced he wouldn't be coming home. "I got an internship at Melissa's dad's company," he explained over the phone. "It's a great opportunity, Mom." I swallowed my disappointment. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you." "Plus," he added, "Melissa and I found an apartment near campus. Her parents are helping with the rent." The apartment, I later discovered through his social media posts, was a luxury unit in a doorman building with a rooftop pool and gym. It looked nothing like the humble place where I still lived and worked to pay for his education. When Jeffrey did finally visit during winter break, his discomfort in our apartment was palpable. He complained about everything: the size, the neighborhood, the furnishings. He spent most of his time on his phone texting Melissa or scrolling through social media. "Mom," he said on the second day of his brief visit, "don't you think it's time you moved to a better place? This neighborhood is getting worse." "The rent is affordable," I explained, "and I'm still saving for your tuition and my future." He rolled his eyes. "You're almost 60. What future are you saving for?" The comment stung, but I let it pass. I was just happy to have him home, however briefly and reluctantly. The real breaking point came during Jeffrey's senior year, when I asked if he would bring Melissa to visit so I could meet her. "Here." He looked around our apartment with undisguised disdain. "No way, Mom. I'm not bringing Melissa here." "I'd really like to meet her," I persisted. "I could cook dinner for us." "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper even though we were alone. "I've told Melissa my mom is a successful nurse practitioner with her own practice. I can't let her see this." He gestured around our home, the same home where I had raised him, worked extra shifts to support him, and saved every penny I could for his education. The pain of that moment was indescribable. My own son was ashamed of me, ashamed of our life together, ashamed of the sacrifices I had made for him. He had constructed a fictional version of me that fit better with the world he now inhabited. One evening during that visit, I made the mistake of sharing my dream with him. "I've been saving," I told him over dinner. "Someday I'm going to buy my own house. Something small but nice, maybe, with a garden." Jeffrey laughed. Not a kind laugh, but a dismissive one that made me feel foolish and small. "Mom, be realistic. Houses around here cost a fortune. You're a nurse who's been renting her whole life. Where would you even get a down payment?" "I've been saving for years," I said quietly, my confidence wavering under his scorn. "At your age, come on. You should be thinking about retirement, not taking on a mortgage you'll never pay off." I changed the subject, my dream feeling suddenly childish and impossible under the weight of his derision. That night, after Jeffrey went to sleep in his old room, I cried silently at the kitchen table, mourning not just my possibly unrealistic dream, but also the loss of my son's respect and appreciation. When Jeffrey graduated college, I attended the ceremony alone. I wore the nicest outfit I owned, purchased specifically for the occasion, and sat among families who arrived in luxury vehicles and designer clothes. I searched for Jeffrey among the sea of caps and gowns, my heart swelling with pride despite everything when I finally spotted him. After the ceremony, I waited in our designated meeting spot, a bundle of roses in hand. When Jeffrey finally appeared, Melissa and her parents were with him. The introductions were brief and uncomfortable. "This is my mom," Jeffrey said with none of the pride I felt for him. Melissa's parents were polite but distant. It was clear from their expression and the way they quickly excused themselves that they had also been told a different version of who I was. The disparity between their designer outfits and my department store dress seemed to widen the already substantial gap between our worlds. The wedding came 6 months later, an extravagant affair at a countryside estate. I was seated in the back during the reception, far from the family table where Jeffrey sat with his new in-laws. He danced with Melissa, posed for professional photographs, and mingled with guests, many of whom I suspected were business contacts of her father's. He visited my table once briefly before being called away to meet someone important. As I watched my son that day, handsome in his expensive tuxedo, moving confidently among the elite crowd, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in the successful young man he had become, yes, but also profound sadness at the values he had embraced and the relationship we had lost. The distance between us was no longer just emotional, it was a chasm of class and values that I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. After the wedding, our communication became even more infrequent. Jeffrey and Melissa moved to another state where her father was expanding his business. I received the occasional text message on holidays and my birthday, sometimes with a generic photo attached. I sent gifts for Christmas and their anniversaries, carefully chosen but probably insufficient compared to the luxury they were accustomed to. I told myself it was normal for children to grow up and away from their parents. I tried to find peace in knowing I had done everything I could to give Jeffrey opportunities for success, but in my heart, I knew that what had happened between us was not the natural order of things. My son hadn't just grown up and moved away, he had rejected me, our history, and the values I had tried to instill in him. While my personal life had taken this painful turn, my professional life was about to change in unexpected ways. After 28 years as a floor nurse and then nursing supervisor at Memorial Hospital, I was approached by Dr. Lawrence Weber, a physician I had worked with for many years. "Claire, I'm leaving to start a healthcare technology company," he told me during a quick conversation in the hospital corridor. "We're developing software to improve patient care coordination. I need someone who understands the real-world nursing workflow to consult on the project. Are you interested?" My initial reaction was hesitation. At 57, I was comfortable in my hospital routine. The idea of entering the corporate world, especially in technology, seemed daunting. "I don't know the first thing about software development," I admitted. Dr. Weber smiled. "That's exactly why I need you. The developers know coding, but they don't understand what nurses actually do and need. Your practical experience is invaluable." After much consideration, I took a leap of faith and accepted a part-time consulting position with Weber Health Technologies, maintaining reduced hours at the hospital initially to ensure I had stable income. The company was small, just 6 employees working out of a modest office space. My role was to review the software designs and provide feedback based on my years of nursing experience. The transition wasn't easy. I felt out of place in the first few meetings surrounded by young tech professionals using terminology I didn't understand. I questioned whether I had made a mistake in accepting the position, but I was determined to contribute and spent evenings researching technical terms and concepts to better communicate with the team. A turning point came during a development meeting when the team was discussing a feature for medication administration. The proposed design was technically elegant but completely impractical for real-world use. "This won't work," I said, finding my voice. "Nurses don't have time to navigate through 4 screens while dispensing medications. They need to be able to verify and document with minimal clicks, preferably while maintaining eye contact with the patient." The room fell silent, and I worried I had overstepped. Then, the lead developer nodded thoughtfully. "You're right," he said. "We need to completely rethink this. Can you walk us through exactly what a nurse needs in this moment?" From that day forward, my confidence grew, as did my role in the company. My practical insights proved crucial to developing software that actually enhanced, rather than hindered, patient care. Dr. Weber began inviting me to meetings with hospital administrators and investors, valuing my ability to translate between the technical and medical worlds. A year into my work with Weber Health Technologies, Dr. Weber made me an unexpected offer. "Claire, I'd like you to join us full-time as our Director of Clinical Implementation," he said, "and I want to offer you stock options in the company." The salary was significantly higher than my nursing position, but it was the stock options that gave me pause. I knew enough about startups to know they were risky. Most failed within the first few years. But I also recognized that this was an opportunity that might never come again at my stage of life. After careful consideration and consultation with a financial advisor recommended by Sandra, an accountant, who had become my friend at the company, I accepted the position. I left Memorial Hospital after nearly 3 decades, a decision that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The next 3 years were the most professionally challenging and rewarding of my life. Our software gained traction in hospitals across the country, streamlining nursing workflows and reducing medication errors. I traveled to implementation sites, trained staff, and gathered feedback for continuous improvement. My intimate knowledge of nursing challenges made me an effective advocate for both the product and the frontline staff using it. What none of us expected was how quickly the company would grow. By the 4th year, Weber Health Technologies had expanded to over 100 employees and was attracting attention from larger healthcare companies. When a major medical technology corporation offered to acquire us, the decision was ultimately financial rather than emotional. The acquisition meant substantial payouts for those of us with stock options. When my financial advisor explained what my stock options were actually worth, I couldn't comprehend the number. It was more money than I had ever imagined, having more than enough to buy a home and secure my retirement. After a lifetime of financial struggle and careful budgeting, the sudden wealth felt surreal. "This is life-changing money, Claire," Sandra told me over coffee after the acquisition was announced. "Have you thought about what you'll do?" The truth was, I hadn't allowed myself to think too concretely about it, fearing disappointment if the acquisition fell through. Now that it was official, my long deferred dream of home ownership surfaced with new vibrancy. I think I might look for a house, I said cautiously, still afraid to fully embrace the possibility. A house? With this kind of money, you could buy a mansion. Sandra laughed, but her eyes were kind. She understood what this meant to me after all these years. Despite my newfound financial security, I maintained my frugal habits. I continued living in my apartment for another year while working with the acquiring company to ensure a smooth transition. My colleagues celebrated with extravagant purchases, new cars, exotic vacations, designer wardrobes. I treated myself to exactly one indulgence, a reliable new car to replace my ancient Honda that had finally given up after 20 years of service. The sudden wealth created an unexpected emotional challenge as well. For the first time in my life, I had achieved significant financial success, but I had no family to share it with. Jeffrey was building his life with Melissa and her family's connections, unaware of my professional achievements. I had never felt his absence more acutely than during the company celebration dinner, watching colleagues toast with their spouses and children, while I sat alone at a table of other singles. Sandra noticed my quietness that evening and sat beside me. "You should be proud, Claire. Not many people have the courage to reinvent themselves at our age. I just wish," I began, then stopped myself. "Your son?" Sandra asked gently. She knew a little about Jeffrey from our occasional conversations. I nodded, unable to articulate the complex grief of having a living child who had chosen to disconnect from me. Success felt hollow without someone to share it with, someone who remembered the years of struggle that made this moment so meaningful. "Maybe it's time to reach out to him," Sandra suggested. "Share your good news." I considered it briefly, but decided against it. Our relationship had deteriorated to holiday text messages and obligatory birthday calls. I didn't want to suddenly contact him, now that I had money reinforcing his materialistic values. And honestly, I feared his reaction would be less about happiness for me and more about what my changed circumstances might mean for him. Instead, I focused on building new connections. I joined a book club in my neighborhood and began volunteer work at a community garden. I made friends who knew me as I was, now not as the struggling single mother I had been. There was freedom in these new relationships, unburdened by past disappointments or expectations. As the transition period with the acquiring company ended, I made a decision that surprised even me at 65. Instead of pursuing another job opportunity, I would retire. My financial advisor assured me I had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. For the first time ever, I could prioritize my own wishes without concern for financial consequences. And my first wish, the dream I had nurtured for decades, was finally within reach, finding a home that truly belonged to me. The day I met with realtor Denise Martinez marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After decades of scrolling through listings I couldn't afford, I was finally in a position to actually buy a home of my own. The reality of this was still sinking in as I sat across from Denise in her office, clutching a folder containing my financial pre-approval information. "So, Claire," Denise said warmly, "tell me what you're looking for in a home." I had rehearsed this moment so many times in my mind over the years, but now that it was actually happening, I felt unexpectedly emotional. "I want light," I began, finding my voice. "Lots of natural light. And a view of something beautiful, maybe trees or water, a garden where I could plant flowers, a kitchen where I could actually enjoy cooking." The words flowed more easily as I continued describing the sanctuary I had imagined during countless late nights after exhausting shifts at the hospital. Denise nodded, taking notes. "Budget range." When I told her, her eyebrows raised slightly. I was still getting used to the number myself. "That opens up some very nice possibilities," she said, "including some properties in coastal areas if that interests you." The coastal areas she mentioned had always seemed like an impossible fantasy, places I drove through occasionally just to admire the homes perched on bluffs overlooking the Pacific. I never imagined I could actually live in such a location. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'd like to look at coastal properties." Over the next 2 weeks, Denise showed me a variety of homes. Some were beautiful, but didn't feel right, too modern, too isolated, or lacking character. I began to worry that I had built up this dream for so many years that no real home could possibly match my expectations. Then came the day Denise called with excitement in her voice. "Claire, a property just came on the market that I think you should see immediately. It's a villa on the coast with an incredible view. The owners are relocating internationally and need to sell quickly." We arranged to see it that afternoon. The drive took us along winding coastal roads until we turned onto a private driveway lined with cypress trees. As we rounded the final curve, the house came into view and my breath caught in my throat. It was a Mediterranean-style villa, not ostentatiously large, but elegant with a terracotta roof and cream-colored walls. Climbing roses framed the entrance, and through the property, I could see the blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon. "It's at the top of your budget," Denise warned as we stepped out of the car. "But given the location and the current market, it's actually quite competitively priced." The moment I stepped through the front door into the sun-drenched entryway, something resonated deep within me. The interior was warm and inviting, with archways leading to different areas of the home and large windows that captured the spectacular view from every major room. The kitchen was spacious, with a center island and professional-grade appliances opening to a dining area with French doors leading to a terrace. The living room featured a stone fireplace and built-in bookshelves that reminded me of images I'd torn from magazines years ago. Upstairs, the master bedroom had a private balcony where I imagined watching sunsets and drinking morning coffee. But it was the garden that truly captured my heart. Terraced and thoughtfully landscaped with native plants, it descended gently toward the cliffside, culminating in a stone patio perfectly positioned for taking in the panoramic ocean view. I stood on that patio, feeling the sea breeze and listening to the distant sound of waves when I knew with absolute certainty that this was my home. This was the place I had been working toward all those years, the dream that had sustained me through double shifts and lonely holidays. "What do you think?" Denise asked, joining me on the patio. "I want to make an offer," I replied, my voice steady, despite the emotions welling up inside me. The negotiation process was nerve-wracking. My offer was accepted with a counter for a slightly higher price, which I agreed to. Then came inspections paperwork and the agonizing wait for final approval. I tried not to get too attached, protecting myself from potential disappointment, but in quiet moments, I allowed myself to imagine a life within those walls. 6 weeks later, on a bright Tuesday morning, Denise met me at the property with keys in hand. "Congratulations, Claire," she said, handing them to me. "Welcome to your new home." I stood in the empty entryway after she left, keys clutched in my hand, overwhelmed by the reality that this beautiful space was actually mine. No landlord, no temporary arrangement, just my home earned through decades of work and sacrifice. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor of the master bedroom, having brought only essentials for the first few days. I woke at dawn and stepped onto the balcony to watch the sun rise over the ocean, tears streaming down my face at the beauty before me and the journey that had brought me here. The process of making the villa truly mine unfolded gradually over the following months. I furnished it room by room, taking time to find pieces that spoke to me rather than rushing to fill the space. My taste had always leaned toward warmth and comfort rather than showiness, and the home came together with that feeling, a sanctuary rather than a showcase. I planted a vegetable garden alongside the ornamental plants, finding unexpected joy in growing my own food. I arranged my modest book collection on the built-in shelves and hung artwork I had collected over the years, pieces chosen for personal meaning rather than value. In the second bedroom, I created a cozy guest room hoping friends might visit, and in the third, a home office where I could manage my finances and correspondence. My neighbors, I discovered, were a mix of full-time residents and those who used their coastal homes as weekend retreats. Barbara and Richard Davis, a retired professor couple in their 70s, lived in the villa next to mine and quickly became friends, inviting me for dinner and introducing me to their social circle. "We've watched this place sit empty for months," Barbara told me over glasses of wine on my terrace one evening. "It's wonderful to see it occupied by someone who appreciates it." Slowly, I built a life in my new community. I joined the local historical society, volunteered at the public library, and became part of a walking group that explored coastal trails every Saturday morning. For the first time in my adult life, I had both financial security and the time to pursue interests beyond mere survival. There were moments, of course, when the house felt too large for just one person. Times when I made a special meal or witnessed a particularly spectacular sunset and wished I had someone to share it with. In those moments, thoughts of Jeffrey inevitably surfaced. I had sent him a brief text when I moved, providing my new address and phone number. He had responded with a simple, "Thanks for the update," and nothing more. 3 years passed in this peaceful rhythm. I adjusted to retirement, to solitude, to the luxury of time and choice that had never before been available to me. The villa became exactly what I had dreamed of all those years, a true home, filled with comfort, beauty, and memories I was creating for myself. In all that time, I received only the occasional obligatory message from Jeffrey on holidays and my birthday. I responded warmly each time, sharing brief updates about my life and asking about his, but our exchanges remained superficial. I had made peace with this reality, focusing on the relationships that brought joy and connection rather than dwelling on what was lost. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, as I was tending to my garden, my phone rang with a number I instantly recognized, despite its infrequent appearance on my screen. Jeffrey's name flashed on the display, and my heart leaped with both hope and apprehension. "Mom." His voice sounded warm, warmer than it had in years. "I'm going to be in your area next week for business. I thought maybe I could stop by and see you. It's been too long." The request, so casual yet so momentous after years of minimal contact, left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was steady, despite my racing heart. "I'd love that, Jeffrey. How about next Thursday you could come for lunch?" "Perfect," he replied, and we settled on a time before ending the call. After hanging up, I stood motionless in my garden, pruning shears, still in hand, trying to process what had just happened. My estranged son was coming to visit. After all this time, I would see him again here in the home he didn't know I could afford, in the life he had no part in creating. I spent the next week in a state of nervous anticipation, cleaning every corner of the already immaculate villa, planning and shopping for the perfect lunch menu, and rehearsing conversations in my head. I wanted everything to be perfect, clinging to the hope that this visit might represent a new beginning for our relationship. The morning of Jeffrey's visit arrived with a perfect coastal day, bright sunshine, a gentle breeze, and clear views to the horizon. I prepared a simple but elegant lunch of grilled salmon, fresh vegetables from my garden, and homemade bread. I set the table on the terrace, positioning it to showcase the spectacular ocean view. At precisely noon, the sound of tires on the gravel driveway alerted me to Jeffrey's arrival. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and went to greet my son for the first time in over 3 years. The sleek, black luxury car that pulled into my driveway was not what I expected. It was clearly a rental, but an expensive one, the kind chosen to make an impression. As Jeffrey stepped out, I was struck by how much he resembled his father now at 38, with touches of silver at his temples and lines beginning to form around his eyes. He was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as designer clothing, his posture exuding the confidence of someone accustomed to moving in wealthy circles. For a moment, he stood looking up at the villa, an unreadable expression on his face. Then he noticed me standing in the doorway, and his expression shifted to a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom," he said, approaching with arms outstretched for a brief, formal embrace. "You look well." "It's wonderful to see you, Jeffrey," I replied, genuine emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. "Come in, please." As I led him through the front door into the entryway with its soaring ceiling and view straight through to the ocean, I watched his expression carefully. The shock was evident, though he tried to mask it quickly. "Quite a place you've got here," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp as they took in the quality of the furnishings and the spectacular setting. "How long have you been here?" "About 3 years now," I answered, guiding him through to the terrace where lunch was waiting. "Would you like a tour after we eat?" "Definitely," he replied, his gaze now fixed on the ocean view. "I'm very interested in seeing the whole property." Over lunch, our conversation remained superficial. Jeffrey spoke about his work at his father-in-law's now quite substantial real estate development company, where he had become a senior executive. He mentioned business trips to Europe and Asia, the exclusive neighborhood where he and Melissa lived, the social circles they moved in. I shared simple stories about my garden, my volunteer work, my friends in the community. I did not mention the company acquisition or my financial circumstances. If Jeffrey was curious about how I came to own this obviously valuable property, he didn't ask directly. As we finished our meal, I offered coffee and dessert, a homemade berry tart with fruits from the local farmer's market. "This is delicious," Jeffrey commented, taking a bite. "Melissa would love it. She's very particular about desserts." It was the opening I had been waiting for. "How is Melissa? I'd love to see her sometime." Jeffrey set down his fork, his expression becoming more animated than it had been throughout our stilted lunch conversation. "She's wonderful. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to see you. We have some exciting news." He paused, and for a moment I hoped he might be about to tell me they were expecting a child, my first grandchild. "Melissa's pregnant," he confirmed, and my heart leaped with genuine joy. "That's wonderful news." "Congratulations, Jeffrey. When is the baby due?" "Late November," he replied. "It's a girl." "A granddaughter," I said softly, imagining for the first time this new role in my life. "I'm so happy for you both." Jeffrey nodded, but rather than elaborating on the pregnancy or their preparations for parenthood, he shifted the conversation abruptly. "So this place, it must have at least 3 bedrooms, right?" The question seemed oddly specific, but I answered naturally. "Yes, 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. Would you like that tour now?" Over the next half hour, I showed Jeffrey through my home. Unlike most visitors who commented on the view, the artwork, or the garden, Jeffrey seemed focused on square footage, the age of appliances, and structural elements. He asked about the property taxes, the homeowners association, and recent renovations. His interest seemed less appreciative and more evaluative, like someone assessing a potential purchase. As we finished the tour back on the terrace, Jeffrey's demeanor changed subtly. He became more engaged, almost charming, reminiscent of the boy he had been before wealth and status became his defining values. "This really is an incredible property, Mom. I had no idea you were living like this." He gestured to the panoramic view. "How did you afford it, if you don't mind me asking?" I gave him a simplified version of my professional journey, mentioning the healthcare technology company and my role there, but not specifying the financial details of the acquisition. "I always knew you were smart," he said, and though the compliment should have pleased me, something in his tone felt calculating rather than proud. Before leaving, Jeffrey mentioned he might be back in the area soon and asked if he could stop by again. Despite the lingering uneasiness from our interaction, I readily agreed, hopeful that this might be the beginning of rebuilding our relationship, especially with a grandchild on the way. That hope was short-lived. The very next morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, Jeffrey stood there, and beside him was a woman I recognized from photos as Melissa, elegant, expensively dressed, and visibly pregnant. "Mom," Jeffrey said with a confidence that suggested he saw nothing unusual about appearing unannounced. "I wanted Melissa to see the place. I hope that's okay." Before I could fully process my surprise, they were stepping past me into the entryway. Melissa offered a practiced social smile and a limp handshake. "Your son has told me so much about you," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "This is a lovely home. So, quaint." The word quaint hung in the air clearly at odds with the substantial and elegant property around us. I chose to ignore the subtle condescension. "Thank you. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Melissa. Congratulations on your pregnancy." She nodded absently, her attention already shifting to the interior of the villa. "Jeffrey said the view was impressive. Let's see it." What followed was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Without waiting for my guidance, Jeffrey began leading Melissa through my home as if conducting a private showing. They moved from room to room, discussing features and potential changes in voices, just loud enough for me to hear as I followed behind. "This wall could come down to open up the space," Jeffrey said in the living room. "The kitchen needs updating," Melissa remarked, running a manicured finger along my countertop with a slight grimace. "These cabinets are dated." "The master bath could be expanded by taking space from the closet," Jeffrey added as they entered my bedroom without hesitation. I stood in the doorway watching them evaluate my personal space as if I were invisible, as if the home I had worked my entire life to obtain was simply a property awaiting their improvements. A growing sense of unease settled in my stomach. When they reached the bedroom I had set up as a home office, Melissa's expression brightened. "This would be perfect for the nursery," she declared. "Great natural light and right next to what would be our bedroom." Our bedroom. The words echoed in my mind along with the implication of what was happening. Still, I told myself I must be misunderstanding. Surely my son wasn't suggesting what it sounded like. We ended up back in the living room where Jeffrey and Melissa seated themselves comfortably on my sofa. Jeffrey leaned forward, his expression serious but with an undertone of excitement. "Mom seeing this place yesterday got me thinking. With the baby coming, Melissa and I have been talking about finding a larger place outside the city, something with clean air, a view, more space." I nodded cautiously, still hoping I was misreading the situation. "This villa would be perfect for us," he continued, confirming my growing suspicion. "It's exactly what we've been looking for: spacious, great location, excellent school district for when the baby's older. Not to mention the prestige of the address," Melissa added. "This neighborhood has exactly the right associations for us socially." Jeffrey reached for my hand, his expression shifting to one of practiced concern. "Mom, this place is really too big for just one person. All this space, the maintenance, the gardening at your age, it must be overwhelming." "I manage quite well," I replied, withdrawing my hand gently but firmly. "I have a service for the heavy gardening work, and I enjoy taking care of my home. But wouldn't you be happier in something smaller, more appropriate?" Melissa suggested, her tone reminiscent of someone speaking to a child. "A nice condo in a seniors community, perhaps? With people your own age and activities organized for you?" I looked between them, finally allowing myself to fully comprehend what was happening. My son and his wife were not here to reconnect or share in my life. They had come with the expectation of claiming my home as their own, of relegating me to some diminished existence they deemed appropriate for someone of my age. "Jeffrey," I said carefully, "are you suggesting that I should sell my home to you?" "It makes perfect sense," he replied, seemingly relieved that I understood. "We could take the villa off your hands. You wouldn't have to worry about selling on the open market or dealing with realtors. We could make it a private sale. And you could use the money for a comfortable retirement," Melissa added. "Something modest but nice." "I see," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the anger and hurt building inside me. "And where exactly do you suggest I live while you raise your family in my home?" Jeffrey waved his hand dismissively. "There are plenty of options for seniors. Nice retirement communities with social activities, medical staff on call, or a small condo if you prefer independence. We'd help you find something suitable, of course." "Of course," I echoed, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from my voice. Either missing or ignoring my tone, Jeffrey pressed on. "It's really the perfect solution for everyone. You downsize to something more manageable, we get a family home in an excellent location, and you'd have the satisfaction of knowing your granddaughter would grow up here. We could even have you over for holidays," Melissa offered magnanimously. "You could visit your old home." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the audacity of what I was hearing. After years of minimal contact, after Jeffrey had laughed at my dream of homeownership, after he had distanced himself from me due to shame over my modest circumstances, he now felt entitled to claim the beautiful home I had earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice. "I'm not interested in selling," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. Jeffrey's expression hardened slightly. "Mom, be practical. What does a woman your age need with all this space anyway? It's wasteful." "It's my home," I replied simply. "The home I worked for my entire life." "After everything you owe me," Jeffrey said, his voice taking on an edge I recognized from our last difficult conversations years ago. "This seems like a small thing to ask." The words struck like a physical blow. "What I owe you. I'm your only child," he said, as if this fact alone created an obligation. "I'm giving you the chance to be part of your granddaughter's life, to leave a legacy. My legacy is not this house, Jeffrey. It's the values I tried to teach you. Values that clearly didn't take root." Melissa shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, her hand moving protectively to her pregnant belly. Jeffrey's face flushed with anger. "This is about family," he insisted, "about doing what's best for the next generation." "No," I said, rising from my seat. "This is about entitlement. You believe you're entitled to take what I've earned simply because you want it. We're not taking anything, Jeffrey protested. We're offering to buy it. At what price? I asked. And with whose money? Your father-in-law's? The flush on Jeffrey's face deepened, confirming my suspicion. This conversation is over, I said, moving toward the entryway, indicating it was time for them to leave. I'm not selling my home. Not to you, not to anyone. Jeffrey remained seated, his expression now openly hostile. We're not finished discussing this. Yes, we are, I insisted. Please leave now. You're being unreasonable, he said, finally standing. We'll come back when you've had time to think about it rationally. Don't come back, I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts to remain composed. Not if this is your purpose. You can't mean that, Jeffrey said, moving toward the door with Melissa following. This is about your granddaughter's future. No, I replied. This is about respect, something you haven't shown me in a very long time. At the door, Jeffrey turned, his expression calculating. We'll be back tomorrow. You'll have had time to reconsider by then. It wasn't a question or a request. It was a statement of intent, a clear indication that my wishes and boundaries meant nothing to him. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it, finally, allowing the tears I had been holding back to fall freely. For hours afterward, I moved through my home in a daze of grief and anger, touching the furnishings I had chosen so carefully, looking out at the view that had been my dream for decades. The space that had been my sanctuary now felt violated by their presumptuous evaluation and dismissal. That evening, I called Barbara, my neighbor and friend, and shared what had happened. Her outrage on my behalf was comforting, as was her practical advice. Change your locks tomorrow, she suggested. And if they come back uninvited, don't hesitate to call the police. This is your home, Claire. You have every right to protect it and yourself. I slept poorly that night, my mind replaying the conversation and all its implications. By morning, I had made a decision. I contacted a locksmith who came that afternoon to change all the exterior locks. I also spoke with the Homeowners Association security about not allowing visitors without my express permission. As predicted, Jeffrey's car appeared in my driveway the following day. This time, I did not open the door. I watched through the window as he rang the bell repeatedly, then tried his key in the lock, looking confused and then angry when it didn't work. He began pounding on the door, his voice raised. Mom, open the door. We need to talk about this. When I didn't respond, he moved to the windows, peering in his expression, visible even from where I stood. It was not concern I saw there. It was entitlement frustration at being denied something he believed should be his for the taking. After 20 minutes of this, I did something I never imagined I would need to do. I called the local police department. There's someone at my property who is refusing to leave, I explained calmly to the dispatcher. I've asked him not to return, but he's continuing to attempt entry. Is this person known to you? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I replied, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. It's my son. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes. I watched from the window as they spoke with Jeffrey, who gesticulated animatedly, clearly trying to explain his side of the situation. Eventually, one officer approached my door while the other remained with Jeffrey. I opened the door to a young woman in uniform, her expression professional but kind. Ma'am, we have a gentleman here who claims to be your son. He says you're having a family disagreement about the property. That's partially correct, I replied. He is my son, but this isn't a disagreement. This is my home purchased with my own money. He has been informed that he's not welcome here at this time, but has returned anyway and attempted to use a key that no longer works. The officer nodded. Do you want him removed from the property? The question hung in the air, heavy with all its implications. In that moment, I saw Jeffrey watching us, his expression a mixture of disbelief and growing realization that his tactics would not work here. Yes, I said finally. Please escort him off my property and inform him that he is not to return without an explicit invitation. The officer nodded and returned to her colleague and Jeffrey. I closed the door, unable to watch what followed. Through the window, I saw Jeffrey being guided firmly but respectfully back to his car. The look he cast toward the house before driving away contained no love or understanding, only anger and resentment at being denied. When the officers returned to confirm that Jeffrey had left, they provided me with information about obtaining a restraining order if necessary and recommended documenting any further incidents. After they left, I sat on my terrace overlooking the ocean, feeling both relieved and profoundly sad. In protecting my home, I had likely severed what remained of my relationship with my only child. Yet, beneath the sadness was a surprising sense of peace, the clarity that comes from standing firm in your own truth and worth. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had drawn a boundary that protected not just my physical property, but my dignity and self-respect. That evening, as the sun set over the Pacific in a spectacular display of gold and crimson, I realized that the home I had worked so hard to obtain was more than just a structure of wood and stone. It was a physical manifestation of my journey, a journey that wasn't over yet but had entered a new phase where I would no longer diminish myself for the comfort or convenience of others, even those I loved. The weeks following what I came to think of as the confrontation were eerily quiet. No more unexpected visits from Jeffrey, no calls, not even text messages. Though the silence was painful, it also brought a strange sense of relief. The situation had reached its natural conclusion, the culmination of years of growing distance and fundamentally different values. I found myself reflecting deeply on the journey that had brought me to this point, the decades of working extra shifts as a nurse to provide for my son, the small apartment we had shared that Jeffrey had been so ashamed of, the dream of home ownership that had sustained me through difficult times, a dream Jeffrey had openly mocked. And now the beautiful coastal villa that represented not just my professional success, but my personal resilience. There was grief in these reflections, of course. What mother wouldn't mourn the loss of a relationship with her only child, but there was also a growing clarity about the nature of that relationship and my own role in it. For too many years, I had accepted Jeffrey's dismissal and disrespect, telling myself it was just a phase or that his behavior was somehow my failure as a parent. Now, I recognize that adult children make their own choices about the kind of people they become and the values they embrace. About a month after the police had escorted Jeffrey from my property, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address showed it was from Melissa, not Jeffrey, and it had been sent to my personal post office box rather than my home address. With some trepidation, I opened it, unsure what further demands or accusations it might contain. To my surprise, it was a handwritten apology. "Dear Claire," it began, "I'm writing to express my sincere apology for my behavior during our visit to your home. Looking back, I am deeply embarrassed by my presumptuous attitude and the disrespect we showed you. While I cannot speak for Jeffrey, I want you to know that I have done significant reflection on my actions and recognize how hurtful and inappropriate they were." The letter continued explaining that Melissa had grown up in a family where wealth and acquisition were the primary values, where relationships were often transactional, and where older family members were indeed expected to step aside for the younger generation's convenience. Meeting me and witnessing my quiet dignity in the face of their entitlement had triggered an unexpected reassessment of those values. "Pregnancy has made me think deeply about the kind of mother I want to be," she wrote, "the kind of values I want to pass on to my daughter. I do not want her to grow up believing she is entitled to take from others simply because she desires something, or to value people based on their material possessions rather than their character." Melissa concluded by saying she had left Jeffrey, moving temporarily back to her parents' home while she figured out her next steps. The pregnancy was progressing well, and she hoped that someday, if I were willing, I might be part of her daughter's life, regardless of her relationship with Jeffrey. "Your granddaughter deserves to know her grandmother a woman of such strength and principle. I hope that possibility remains open despite the hurt we have caused." The letter left me stunned. Of all the possible outcomes I had imagined, Melissa's apparent transformation hadn't been among them. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process this unexpected development and determine whether the apology was genuine or another strategy to gain access to what they wanted. In the meantime, I continued building my post-retirement life. My friendship with Barbara and Richard deepened, and I expanded my circle through my volunteer work and community involvement. I joined the board of a local nonprofit that provided housing assistance to low-income families, finding meaningful purpose in helping others achieve the security I had worked so hard to obtain for myself. Through a program at the community center, I began mentoring young single mothers, sharing practical financial advice and emotional support. These women, struggling as I once had, brought both purpose and perspective to my life. Their resilience in the face of challenges reminded me of my own journey, and their gratitude for simple guidance and encouragement was deeply fulfilling. One young woman in particular, Angela, reminded me poignantly of myself 30 years earlier. Raising two children on her own while working and studying to become a licensed practical nurse, she approached each day with determination despite exhaustion and financial stress. I found myself looking forward to our weekly meetings where we would review her budget, discuss work-life balance strategies, and sometimes simply share a cup of tea and a conversation. "I don't know how to thank you," Angela said during one session after I had helped her navigate a complex financial aid application for her nursing program. "You make me believe this is actually possible." "It is possible," I assured her. "I've walked this path. It's difficult, but you're stronger than you know." In helping these women, I found healing for old wounds. Each time I shared a hard-earned lesson from my own experience, each time I saw recognition and hope in their eyes, I felt a piece of my past transform from painful memory to useful wisdom. My journey, with all its struggles and disappointments, became a resource rather than just a personal history. 3 months after receiving Melissa's letter, I finally responded. I thanked her for her apology and expressed appreciation for her reflection and growth. I shared that I would indeed like to be part of my granddaughter's life if circumstances allowed, but that my relationship with Jeffrey would need significant healing before any meaningful reconnection was possible. He would need to recognize me as an autonomous person deserving of respect. I wrote, not just as a mother whose purpose is to sacrifice for his convenience. Melissa and I began a cautious correspondence. She shared updates about her pregnancy, sonogram images, and eventually news of her decision to file for divorce from Jeffrey. According to Melissa, my son had shown little remorse or insight regarding his behavior, maintaining that I was being selfish and irrational about the villa. His reaction to her departure had been primarily focused on the social embarrassment of a failed marriage rather than emotional loss. When my granddaughter Lily was born in late November, Melissa sent a photo from the hospital. The image of that tiny face, so new to the world, and yet carrying the continuation of my family line, brought tears to my eyes. I sent flowers and a handmade baby blanket I had been working on since learning Melissa was expecting. 2 months later, Melissa asked if she could bring Lily to meet me. We arranged for them to visit not at my home, which still carried the emotional weight of the confrontation, but at a charming restaurant in a nearby town with a lovely garden setting. Holding my granddaughter for the first time was an experience of pure joy, unmarred by the complicated history with her father. As I cradled Lily, studying her tiny features and feeling her warm weight in my arms, I marveled at life's capacity for renewal and second chances. "She has your eyes," Melissa said softly. "The same shape." Over lunch, Melissa shared her plans for the future. She had accepted a position with a nonprofit organization, a significant departure from the corporate world she had been raised to value. She was looking for a small house with a garden, something modest but warm, where Lily could grow up with a sense of security and belonging. "I want her childhood to be rich in experiences and relationships, not possessions," Melissa explained. "I've been thinking a lot about what truly matters." As we parted, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Though my relationship with Jeffrey remained broken, something new and hopeful had emerged from the painful rupture, a relationship with my granddaughter and an unexpected friendship with the woman who was raising her. In the year that followed, my life settled into a rhythm of purpose and contentment. Regular visits with Melissa and Lily became a source of joy. My volunteer work expanded to include financial literacy workshops at the women's shelter, where I helped residents develop practical skills for future independence. My garden flourished, as did my friendships within the community. Jeffrey remained distant, sending only a terse congratulatory text when Lily was born. According to Melissa, he had moved to another state for work following their divorce and had little involvement with his daughter beyond required child support payments. While this saddened me, I had come to accept that I couldn't control his choices or values, only my own responses to them. On warm evenings, I often sat on my terrace overlooking the ocean, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, from the struggling single mother in a small apartment to the woman who owned this beautiful coastal villa. From someone who deferred her own dreams to support her child, to someone who had learned to value and protect her own worth. The lesson had been hard won, but clear true. Family is built on love and respect, not obligation or convenience. Sometimes the family we choose in midlife or beyond, friends, mentees, community, brings more joy than the family we're born into or create in youth. And sometimes setting firm boundaries with those who don't respect us isn't just an act of self-preservation, but an essential declaration of our intrinsic value. As I watched the sun sink toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the water, I felt profound gratitude for this home, this sanctuary I had created for myself. Not just the physical structure, though its beauty and comfort were daily pleasures, but the life I had built within and around it. A life of meaning, connection, and authenticity. A life that had required me to lose certain relationships, but had brought new ones that nourished rather than diminished me. This was my legacy, not a property to be handed down, but an example of resilience, self-worth, and the courage to create the life you want at any age. It was a legacy I hoped my granddaughter would someday understand and perhaps find inspiration in for her own journey. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect your worth, or found yourself building a chosen family of friends who truly see and value you? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to be reminded of their own worth and the power of standing firm in it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to honor your own.